1,463 days. That's how long this war has been reshaping the world above ground. But what most people don't realize is that the most decisive battles aren't happening in the open fields of Donetsk or the shattered cities of Zaporizhzhia. They're happening somewhere far darker, far more claustrophobic, and far more terrifying. They're happening underground. To understand just how deep this war has gone, you have to go back to the very beginning. Beneath the presidential office on Bankova Street in Kiev, there is a massive bomb shelter, a relic of the Cold War, built into the earth like a secret the Soviet Union never wanted anyone to find. It was here, in those first chaotic minutes of the Russian invasion, that Volodymyr Zelenskyy sat surrounded by flickering screens and the weight of a nation on his shoulders. World leaders called. Offers came in, and it was from this underground bunker that Zelenskyy delivered one of the most quoted lines of the entire conflict. He didn't need a ride, he needed ammunition. That moment, born underground, defined the entire tone of what was to come. Because 4 years later, the underground isn't just where leaders make decisions, it's where wars are won and lost. The front lines today tell a story that no map can fully capture. In Zaporizhzhia, Ukrainian armed forces have liberated 8 settlements and reclaimed roughly 400 square kilometers of territory. The speed of that advance was staggering, and it sent Russian troops scrambling. But they didn't retreat to fortified surface positions. They went down. Russian soldiers began digging, tunneling, burrowing into the earth like animals fleeing a predator. And the footage that emerged from these tunnels tells you everything you need to know about the current state of Putin's military. In one video, a Russian commander sits inside a UAZ vehicle rolling through a concrete-lined tunnel with wooden flooring and a reinforced earthen roof. He speaks with pride, calling this structure a masterpiece of field engineering, claiming it can absorb the impact of airborne bombs. His brigade has apparently dug kilometers of these passages. The other soldiers have started calling them the Metro Builders, and they seem to wear that nickname like a badge of honor. But there's a grim irony buried inside that pride. Because in the same region, just days after that footage emerged, Russian forces lost another 100 square kilometers of territory. The men who built those tunnels retreated into them not to launch an offensive, but to survive one. And survival underground, as this war has shown again and again, is never guaranteed. The Ukrainian military has been studying Russian tunnel movements very carefully, and what they've learned is that these underground passages, no matter how well constructed, have one unavoidable flaw. They have entrances, they have exits, and those openings are visible from the sky. Storm Shadow cruise missiles, ATACMS ballistic rockets, heavy bombers, all of them are capable of targeting the mouths of these tunnels. A soldier inside a concrete passage might be protected from shrapnel, but if the exit is destroyed, that protection becomes a prison. The tunnel doesn't save you, it buries you. And that's not a hypothetical scenario, that's exactly what happened more than once in some of the most shocking engagements of this entire war. Go to the Sumy region, a quiet stretch of land near the village of Yablonivka, where an old gas pipeline runs beneath the fields like an industrial scar from a different era. Russian commanders looked at that pipeline and saw an opportunity. A narrow, concealed corridor stretching directly toward Ukrainian positions. If they could move a unit through it quietly, they could emerge behind enemy lines and catch the Ukrainians completely off guard. 22 Russian infantrymen were selected for the mission. They entered the pipeline single file, moving through the darkness like chimney sweeps working a flue, rifles pressed against their chests, barely enough room to breathe. What they didn't know was that Ukraine's elite 71st Independent Air Assault Brigade had already been watching them. Thermal drone footage had picked up the movement. The plan was decoded before it even began. Ukrainian paratroopers positioned themselves at the pipeline's exit and waited. When the Russian unit crawled into range, they didn't get a firefight. They got an execution. Artillery opened up. FPV drones dove into the pipeline's openings in coordinated waves. Unmanned bombers struck from above. Of the 22 soldiers who entered that pipeline, only one made it out. He was wounded, barely conscious, and he crawled over the bodies of his comrades to drag himself back toward Russian lines. The pipeline that was supposed to be a secret passage became a mass grave. And the Russian command, watching this unfold, apparently learned nothing from it. Because weeks later, almost the same thing happened again, this time in the Kursk region. A different pipeline, a different unit, the same fatal miscalculation. This time, Russian special forces, approximately 50 soldiers, entered an old Soyuz gas pipeline with the same plan. Infiltrate, emerge behind Ukrainian lines, strike before the enemy can react. Ukraine's 7th Rapid Reaction Corps had been monitoring the pipeline's entry and exit points with thermal camera drones for days. They waited. They let the Russian unit advance deep into the tunnel, passed the point where turning back became impossible. Then they moved. The exit was detonated. The entrance was sealed. More than 40 soldiers were trapped in the pitch black, in a space barely wide enough to turn around in, with no way forward and no way back. Some were killed by Ukrainian fire directed into the tunnel. Others were overcome in the darkness. It was not a battle. It was a controlled demolition of an enemy unit that had walked into a trap with its eyes wide open. And it wasn't even the first time this had happened in a pipeline. Soldiers trapped in a Kursk region tunnel months earlier had been found in states of panic and psychological collapse, screaming into radios that no one answered, unable to escape, unable to advance, just waiting in the dark for something to end it. These incidents don't just represent tactical failures. They represent a command culture that keeps sending men into situations it already knows are fatal because the alternative is admitting that the strategy itself is broken. While Russian troops have been crawling through stolen pipelines and dying in improvised tunnels, the Ukrainian military has been building something that belongs in an entirely different category. Something that changes the fundamental logic of how wars are fought. Near Pokrovsk, in the Donetsk region, one of the most contested and violent stretches of front line in the entire conflict, a private Ukrainian construction company called Avtoshliak Pivden has completed a project that military engineers around the world are now studying with barely concealed awe. What they built is not a trench. It is not a bunker in the traditional sense. It is a fully functional underground city stretching for 30 kilometers beneath the earth, complete with interconnected command centers, firing positions, ventilation systems, fiber optic communications, and Starlink terminals embedded in the walls. The construction happened under constant Russian drone harassment. UAVs targeted the machinery. Workers were wounded. Some were killed, and the building never stopped. The result is a structure so comprehensive that Ukrainian soldiers moving from one fighting position to another never have to break the surface. A soldier can wake up in an underground bunk, walk through a reinforced corridor to a command center, receive orders, move to a firing position, engage the enemy, and return to rest, all without ever being visible to a drone overhead. For Russian UAV operators searching for targets, it is like fighting an army of ghosts. The thermal cameras show empty ground, but the ground shoots back. The tops of these tunnels are layered with reinforced concrete and steel plating, specifically engineered to absorb the impact of heavy dive attacks. The tunnel geometry itself is designed to defeat pressure waves. Corners are placed every 10 meters. Zigzag patterns break the momentum of any explosion that manages to penetrate the outer shell. Sharp turns act like sound suppressors, trapping not just noise but shockwaves, slowing the physics of destruction before it can reach the people living inside. This is not improvised field engineering. This is a doctrine, a new theory of how armies survive in an era where everything on the surface can be seen, targeted, and destroyed within minutes of appearing on a screen. And it goes deeper than survival, because underneath, the underground isn't just a place where soldiers hide. It's a place where the war is manufactured. On the surface, Russian satellites photograph what appear to be ruined or abandoned buildings, worthless rubble. But beneath those buildings, in basement networks that connect to the tunnel system, hundreds of heavy drones are being assembled every single day. Three-dimensional printers run continuously. Grenades are modified. Software is written and uploaded. Engineers work in shifts, invisible to everything above them. An Iskander ballistic missile costs millions of dollars and destroys a single coordinate. To eliminate the distributed network of small underground workshops producing Ukrainian drones, Russia would need to fire thousands of them, spending a fortune to hit targets it can't even locate. The economic math is devastating for Moscow. Ukraine has turned the underground into an asymmetric industrial advantage, spreading its production across dozens of small hidden nodes in a network that functions exactly like the internet. Destroy one node and the rest keep running. Russia keeps launching its expensive missiles at empty ground while the machines underground keep humming. This strategy didn't emerge from nowhere. Its roots run back almost a century, to a time when a different kind of war threatened Kyiv from the air. During World War II, Stalin ordered the construction of massive tunnels beneath the Dnipro River, designed to maintain railway logistics even if the bridges above were destroyed by German Stuka dive bombers. The engineers of that era poured thousands of tons of concrete into the earth, working against time and against an advancing enemy. The war moved too fast, and the project was never completed. But the mentality survived. What Ukraine is doing today is taking that Soviet bunker doctrine and stripping out everything obsolete. The steam trains are gone. The telegraph lines are gone. In their place, server rooms, autonomous weapon stations, drone assembly lines, and surgical theaters. The Soviet Union built underground to survive. Ukraine builds underground to fight, because war produces wounds, and wounds have to be treated somewhere. Russian drone operators have made a point of targeting vehicles marked with red crosses, ambulances, medical transports, evacuation routes. All of them have become priority targets, which is one of the most straightforward war crimes being committed in this conflict and one of the least discussed. Ukraine's response was not to protest. It was to take the hospitals underground. Not far from Pokrovsk, 6 meters beneath the surface, a fully operational surgical facility is running around the clock. Steel shelters form the walls. Wooden beams and layers of soil provide overhead cover. Inside, there are cardiac monitors, ventilators, and a sterile operating room where trauma surgeries are performed while artillery rounds detonate in the ground above. Surgeon Major Alexander Holvashchenko and his team treat between 30 and 40 soldiers every single day in this facility. He described the nature of the injuries with a simple clarity that says more about this war than any strategic analysis could. 90% of the cases are caused by enemy drones. Almost no bullet wounds. It is the age of drones. A completely different kind of warfare. The men and women who built these underground hospitals, funded by the Ukrainian steel company Metinvest, have made it possible for soldiers to survive injuries that would have been fatal in any previous conflict, simply because they moved the point of care out of reach. But physics doesn't care about engineering ingenuity, and the Russians know it. Ukraine's underground fortifications have effectively neutralized conventional artillery. Shell after shell falls on reinforced concrete that barely shudders. So Russia has turned to something more primal, more indiscriminate, and more terrifying: thermobaric weapons. The OW-1500 bomb and the TOS-1A Solnsepyok system were designed with exactly this scenario in mind. They do not try to crack concrete, they target air. A thermobaric weapon disperses a cloud of fuel across a wide area and then ignites it in a secondary detonation. The resulting explosion doesn't just create a pressure wave, it creates a vacuum. Every molecule of oxygen in the affected zone is consumed in an instant. Soldiers behind reinforced concrete walls, protected from shrapnel, protected from direct blast, are killed by the absence of air. The pressure wave from a thermobaric explosion doesn't stop at a wall. It flows through ventilation shafts, around corners, down stairwells, like a liquid finding every available path. Ukrainian engineers responded by installing airtight airlock systems on tunnel doors, systems borrowed directly from nuclear submarine design, built to seal a section of tunnel and prevent the atmospheric wave from propagating further. It is an arms race being waged not with weapons but with physics, not with firepower but with thermodynamics. And at its center is a question so fundamental it sounds almost philosophical. Can you weaponize the atmosphere itself? In Ukraine, the answer is yes. That is already happening. And if thermobaric bombs target the air, Russian geophone arrays target the silence. Because underground, the second you make a sound, you give yourself away. Seismic sensors placed in the earth above Ukrainian tunnel networks can detect the vibration of a running generator from kilometers away, the rotation of a ventilation fan, the footsteps of a soldier in hard-soled boots, a wrench dropped on a concrete floor. All of it transmits through the ground as a detectable signal, and Russian operators are listening for exactly these signatures. When a regular vibration is detected at a specific coordinate, a bunker-busting munition is directed to that point within minutes. The response inside the tunnels has been extraordinary in its strangeness. Ukrainian soldiers now wear rubber-soled footwear specifically designed to absorb vibration. Generators are mounted on rubber isolation blocks. Machines are scheduled to run in irregular patterns to prevent the kind of rhythmic signature that a seismic sensor can lock onto. The front line has essentially become a submarine warfare simulation. Two forces moving through the dark, listening for each other, trying to stay silent, knowing that any detectable sound could be the last one they make. The technology has dragged the oldest, most primal form of human fear, the fear of being hunted in the dark, into a war being fought with 21st century sensor arrays. Every physical threat that engineering has answered, every bomb design that has been countered with a new layer of concrete or an airlock door, there remains one problem that no amount of reinforcement can solve. The human mind was not built for this. Soldiers in these tunnel networks spend weeks underground, sometimes months. The sun becomes a memory. Circadian rhythms collapse without natural light cycles. Vitamin D levels fall. Sleep patterns fragment. And in the silence and the dark, something that military psychologists call bunker syndrome begins to take hold. It is not a dramatic breakdown. It is a slow erosion, a deepening heaviness. The claustrophobia of the space combines with the psychological weight of the war happening somewhere above, and the combination produces a kind of depression that is qualitatively different from combat stress on the surface. Men who are physically safer underground than they would ever be in a trench become mentally worn down in ways that no armor can prevent. This is the cruelest irony of the entire underground strategy. The technology keeps the body alive by removing it from its natural environment. The natural environment, the open air, the sky, the daylight is precisely where everything wants to kill it. So soldiers are preserved in darkness and slowly consumed by it at the same time. Ukraine's victory will depend not only on the structural integrity of its tunnels, but on how long human beings can endure that particular kind of darkness without losing themselves inside it. Which is why the next evolution of underground warfare is already removing the human being from the equation entirely. Why the drone war above ground captured the world's attention, producing millions of viral videos of aerial strikes and intercepts, a quieter revolution was happening below. Ukrainian-designed unmanned ground vehicles, systems like the Ratel S and the Ironclad, are now being sent into tunnel networks ahead of human soldiers. These are not humanoid robots from science fiction. They are low-profile, wheeled or tracked platforms carrying thermal sensors and explosive payloads. They move through the darkness autonomously or by remote control, scanning for body heat, navigating corridors too narrow and too dangerous to send a person into. When they find a target, they don't retreat. They detonate. The calculus is coldly practical. Turning a dark corner with a rifle in your hands, knowing something might be waiting on the other side, is one of the most terrifying experiences a soldier can face. Sending a robot to turn that corner costs metal and circuitry. The Russians have responded with remotely operated machine gun emplacements at tunnel entrances and magnetic mines designed to disable tracked vehicles. So now, in the deepest passages of these underground networks, robots from both sides are encountering each other in the dark. No human beings present, just machines, circuits, sensors, and explosives, fighting engagements that no one will ever write a medal citation about, producing wreckage that no one will recover, in tunnels that may never see daylight again. What is happening beneath the fields of eastern Ukraine is not a local adaptation to a specific tactical problem. It is the first draft of how all future wars between advanced militaries will be fought. NATO planners are studying these tunnel networks. Pentagon analysts are running simulations based on the engineering data coming out of Pokrovsk, because the logic is inexorable. In a world where satellite coverage is continuous, where drone swarms can locate and strike any visible target within minutes, where AI-powered sensor networks can track movement across entire regions in real time, the surface of the Earth is no longer a viable battlefield for anyone who wants to survive. The era of the tank may genuinely be ending, not because tanks became obsolete in theory, but because a $500 drone can kill a vehicle that cost $1 billion to develop, and there is no engineering solution that changes that math on the surface. The ground itself has become the only armor that works. Ukraine didn't choose to go underground because it was a clever strategic preference. It went underground because the surface became unsurvivable. And in doing so, it has shown every military in the world where the next war will be fought. What you see on the maps, those relatively static front lines that shift by a few kilometers every week, those are the surface layer of a conflict that is actually being decided in the dark, dozens of meters below the ground you're looking at. Beneath those lines, tunnels stretch for dozens of kilometers. Robots patrol the corridors. Surgeons operate under artillery bombardment. Drone factories run without windows. Soldiers lie awake in the silence, listening for the sound of someone listening for them. Russian soldiers don't know what's beneath the ground they're standing on. Ukrainian soldiers don't know what they'll find at the end of the tunnel in front of them. Both sides are fighting a war that no doctrine fully prepared them for, adapting in real time to conditions that have never existed before in military history, and the outcome will be decided not by who fires the most shells or who holds the most territory on a map, but by who adapts best to the darkness. By who can live in it the longest. By who can turn it from a place of fear into a place of power. That question doesn't have an answer yet. But somewhere underground right now, both sides are working on one.